You can just do things. This is the lesson I'm learning every day by building out this channel across almost 100 videos explaining tech that doesn't get mainstream interest, even though I think they deserve the spotlight. But the more important thing is, if you just do things in Ethereum and you can show the proof of work and that other people actually value it, you might even be able to actually get paid. That's what's so powerful about the open source model as laid out by the Ethereum network and Gitcoin. That's Gitcoin, not Bitcoin. If you're not sure what I mean, watch on. Because you too, like me, can do meaningful work and potentially get recognized for it in the form of public goods funding. The nature of open source building has traditionally been that of a pure public good. Someone, somewhere in the world is maintaining that random library, that random piece of software that everyone depends on. For example, in 2014, the Heartbleed bug exposed to the world that 2 unpaid volunteers basically maintained the Open SSL library, which is the cryptographic library that basically secures HTTPS. And HTTPS is ubiquitous in modern web browsing, securing how you log into anything, or how you do banking, or how you do online shopping. Or take curl as another example, a small command line tool that fetches data from the web. It's literally used in almost every tool imaginable. Browsers, operating systems, APIs, your Tesla, even your TV. Apple, Microsoft, Google, if you can name it, they depend on it. And guess what? It's primarily maintained by one Swedish developer, Daniel Stenberg, who's been doing it for 25 years. Lacking a real means of funding open source software means these projects often go underfunded and eventually completely unsupported. That would be a terrible world to live in because open source software has brought so much good to the world. Crypto obviously puts forth a different model. If what you develop is incentivized by a network token, any value that you create, whether it's an application or a crucial piece of code, or maybe some form of media, that ultimately gets driven back towards that token itself. But one of my favorite things about the Ethereum model is that it truly is an ecosystem that feels like an infinite garden, where help begets more help. And there's a genuine form of coordination and collaboration amongst peers collectively nurturing the network. I mean, I personally don't find this build and nurture type culture in any other ecosystem, and certainly not outside of crypto. And there's no other project in Ethereum that's as win and help win as Gitcoin. Again, that's Gitcoin, not Bitcoin. Gitcoin is a public goods funding protocol that is built on Ethereum and has been nurturing public goods projects for the past 8 years. Gitcoin has funded some of the most important public goods projects built in crypto, including Coin Center, an organization that advocates for crypto in public policy, Rodkey, a privacy-preserving portfolio manager, DeFi Llama, a widely used open source dashboard for crypto metrics, and even the Tor project, recognized unanimously as good for privacy on the internet. One of the coolest things about Gitcoin is that it uses an innovative funding mechanism that is very different from traditional forms. In the old model, you might get a selection committee who then allocates funding to different applicants based on a set of criteria. But oftentimes this process is opaque. The criteria might be unclear, and the winners can sometimes feel like insider picks. Gitcoin throws all of that out the window and uses a funding mechanism called Quadratic Funding. Quadratic Funding is a funding model co-created by Vitalik Buterin, Zoe Harkness, and Glenn Whale in their 2018 paper titled Liberal Radicalism: Formal Rules for a Society Neutral Among Communities. And quadratic funding was officially implemented by Gitcoin to proof of concept such a mechanism. Quadratic funding feels a bit more democratic, if you will, than, say, a unilateral process made by a privileged committee. For example, Gitcoin will take a pool of funds that has been set aside for a category of builders, say decentralized science, as an example, and then Gitcoin will help match funding based on the number of unique donations made to that grantee and not the size of the donations. Practically speaking, this means that 10 people giving $10 each will receive a much larger match from Gitcoin than one applicant receiving $100. That's an intentional design choice of the protocol that amplifies broad community support over concentrated wealth. Now, of course, you might ask, well, couldn't I just make a bunch of fake wallets and then make a bunch of fake donations to rig the system? But that's where Gitcoin relies on Sybil-resistant measures, like using proof of humanity, rights ID, or other identity checks to reduce the abuse. This is an awesome way of funding. The importance of a project is signaled not by the total amount of donations made to it, but by the unique number of people that have made donations to a project, no matter how big or small. Another important thing to note is that anyone anywhere in the world with an internet connection can apply to be accepted for a Gitcoin grants round. Now, of course, you have to demonstrate your contribution and impact. You can't just copy-paste someone else's work or put in a minimal amount of effort expecting to get accepted and people to vote for you. You have to be contributing something of value. But the point stands. If you believe you do important work and it's valuable to the public domain, you can apply. The point of Ethereum and Gitcoin is that it's a permissionless, blank canvas. You can just do things in Ethereum. It doesn't matter if it's code or a decentralized application or a community meetup that you host every month or a video like this one. If you can prove the work and prove the impact, you can also get accepted. Isn't that amazing? Gitcoin is a hotbed for testing innovative democratic processes built for the 21st century. On-chain quadratic voting is just the tip of the IRL iceberg. The irony is we live in a world that runs trillion-dollar markets by code, but when it comes to real-world decision-making, that falls on paper, opaque committees, and blind trust. Elections every few years, funding by bureaucracy, feedback loops that take decades. Gitcoin's experiments are the exact opposite. Fast, transparent, and programmable. If we could rewire the way democracy works, then Gitcoin is almost certainly something to model off of. Gitcoin is just about to begin Gitcoin Grants Round 24, and they've said GG24 marks a strategic shift towards exploring different voting and funding mechanisms. The first time ever, Gitcoin will be running 6 distinct voting mechanisms for 6 different domains, each specially chosen for the specific category of the problem. So, for example, I'm a huge fan of privacy work in crypto, especially in Ethereum. And GG24 has a privacy round that uses a private on-chain voting mechanism called Minimal Anti-Collusion Infrastructure, or MACI for short. And MACI has been implemented by a team called Privote. And Privote is being used for the voting in GG24's privacy round. MACI and Privote uses encryption and zero-knowledge proofs to protect how you're voting, while guaranteeing the final tally of votes cannot be tampered with. I mean, how cool is that? Imagine if governments in the real world used something like this for federal elections. Could the Jan 6th storming of the US Capitol been entirely prevented if everyone trusted open-sourced technology that guarantees privacy? Another cool proof of concept Gitcoin is testing is conviction voting, and it works by allocating funding based on which supporters have continuously shown support for a project by staking support. So the longer your stake lasts, the more conviction your vote has, until it hits a threshold and then funding is released. Again, a super cool experiment with tons of applications for a living and breathing democracy. Imagine if you could stake your support for a policy or a bill by staking your one vote over 4 years, and the longer your stake lasts, the more value that vote has. In a world where trust in institutions is rapidly eroding, I'm actually so grateful to Gitcoin and Ethereum for these mini experiments in voting and democracy. Soon enough, we can blend our on-chain learnings and experiences with the real world. Because let's face it, our institutions, they're in need of a major 21st century upgrade. Okay, why am I telling you all of this? That's because my channel has been accepted as a grant applicant for the privacy domain in Gitcoin Grants Round 24. For those of you new to the channel, I've been a big supporter of privacy and zero-knowledge projects like Railgun, Fileverse, FluidKey, ZKP2P, and so much more. And as a staunch advocate of self-custody tech, privacy, and on-chain crypto, I couldn't be more honored to have been accepted for my first Gitcoin rounds ever. Spreading the good word on good work in crypto is hard work, and I do it out of love and passion because I feel like our Ethereum builders, especially the ones that don't do attention-grabbing stuff like trading or perpetual markets, they deserve so much more of the spotlight. If you find my work valuable, then there's nothing that will show your support more than ever now by going to gitcoin.privote.live, making a small donation, and then voting for 90 seconds to crypto between October 21st and October 29th. But beyond that small ask, the most important takeaway for you now is to know that in Ethereum, you can really just do things. And who knows, maybe your project will one day get accepted into a Gitcoin grants round and be eligible to receive funding just like mine. Now that you've learned a shortcut to getting funding by building valuable things for Ethereum through Gitcoin, maybe you'll want to start scheming for your next great project to receive a grant. However, doing it on a Google Docs or Notion, that's just irresponsible and not private. What if there's a stupid simple shortcut to start writing documents and spreadsheets that you truly own, and it's truly private? Watch my next video on Fileverse to learn how you can reclaim your digital sovereignty over your productivity. That's it for now. Peace.